We are online. Hi, Barry.
How are you doing, Johan? Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, our last webinar for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, a little bit sad, I guess.
Absolutely.
It's
become part of our lives over the last 7 weeks.
Yeah. Hello, Michelle. Hello, Annie.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you guys? What's the weather doing your side?
It's sunny today. It has been raining here for a bit, but it's a beautiful day today.
Brilliant.
Can't too bad out there with the fire going.
Yeah.
Okay,
been going for a while.
Hi, Alfonso, all the way from Barcelona. So we really are having an international contingent joining us, which is fantastic.
Alfonso has been with us for a couple of weeks now. So has
Terry, I see there.
Jane. Hi, Jane. Hayward Sweet, Ian Walker signed up. Jim, Julie, Martel Swart. Might be South African, sounds like it. Penny Cook, hello. Hi, Sarah. Todd Tovey. Okay, fantastic. Coming in.
Teresa, just waiting another 1 or 2 minutes, giving everyone a chance to sign up.
Looks like golfing weather your side as well.
It's a little bit windy, so let's hope it all we don't get blown away during the call. But yeah, certainly we've got all the golfers out on the course. Beautiful day. If anything, rather hot. And believe it or not, we're dying for a little bit of rain in the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For the vineyards.
Well, just on that, Johan, we couldn't have asked for better growing weather. The vines have literally grown 2 feet in the last week. So absolutely perfect weather for them. And luckily, most of our vines are at least 3 years old now, and they've developed a really good root system. So I think we're all good on that side. And being on a clay is going to be a real advantage to us this year, because obviously a great water holding capacity.
Okay.
All right, just to everyone, I think a big welcome to our last webinar in the series. Certainly not the last webinar. You're going to see a lot of us over the next year. And so today, we'll finish off the series. We've been waiting for this one, with a little sweet wine, a little Noble Late Harvest, 2015. So you'll see a little bit of a different label on these wines. This was the original Benguela Cove label before Johan joined the team. Johanna, this is a wine that's always fascinated me, and really interesting to see how you make this wine. And this time around, I think you're going to start off with a little tasting early on, so we can give it a go.
Yes, Barry, yeah, thank you. We don't have, apart from our museum stock, a lot of this, or we don't have any of this left in South Africa. I think we're about the only place in the world that's still got stock, apart from a few bottles we've got in the library. So I'm very keen to get to have a taste of this, because it's been a while. So yeah, I've just poured me some, as I said last week. Best enjoyed when it's quite chilled, and you touched on it. It's this wine. What makes it kind of special is that it's truly a work of nature. It's yes, the viticulturist has got a close hand on it. The winemaker needs to look after it in the winery, but for the rest, the magic all happens with nature and what happens out in the vineyards, which I'll touch on a little bit later. And I've took a few photos this year when we were lucky to have botrytis again this year to be able to make this style of wine. But for now, just because I'm so keen to taste it, I thought let's start with the tasting this week. So I hope everybody's got a little bit in their glass by now. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a white background behind me, but it's like a straw gold in color, which is quite common for these wines. When they're a little bit younger, they're more like a green gold. Now it's starting to move into a straw gold color. And from there also the name, of course, for this Noble Late or botrytis wines as liquid gold. So let's have a a sniff and a taste. So what I like, or what I see on the nose, is like a nice honeycomb, like an orange peel, almost like, it reminds me of shaved ginger almost on the nose that you get. And then obviously all that, which is also synonym with these wines, is the dried peaches and marzipan, and almost like a little hint of vanilla for me in this wine. So 20% of this wine was fermented in barrel, but it's older barrel, so I doubt it that the vanilla is coming from the wood. I think it's purely a wine character that we're seeing. So let's just try it again.
Just to all our viewers, I think we've only got 250 bottles left in stock. So if you're keen to get your hands on a few more bottles, let me know.
Yeah, so for me, Barry, again, nice like orange type flavors, being made from Sauvignon Blanc that I didn't mention. It's got some nice passion fruit notes in there. Again, the honey coming through. But what I really enjoy about this wine is, although it's really, really sweet, it's also got a really nice acidity, almost like it reminds me like a pineapple-y like acidity. You know, it's quite sharp, but with the high sugar, it works really well. So what is initially very sweet kind of finishes dry, because that acidity just comes and almost like washes out all the sweetness from your palate. So even though sweet, it's got this nice, not dry finish, but a clean finish towards the end. So again, just the importance and the beauty of balance, you know, where often sweet wines, the sweetness is just too high and totally out of balance with the rest of the wine, and it doesn't have the acidity to counter that sweetness, which kind of makes it out of balance, which just leaves you with this lingering sweetness, which isn't always great. You know, you really need that acidity to come out and clean out the palate again. So I've been going on about balance quite a bit, but it is what our wines is about, is ultimately is that balance, you know. So when you talk about balance in sweet wines, as I said, the sugar, the acidity, but also alcohol on sweet wines has got a big role to play, and different and various styles of sweet wines have different alcohol levels, this being as low as 9.5% alcohol, and then you get port style wines that go to 22% alcohol. But you know, with sweet wines and this style of wine, when you sit on a 12.5% alcohol with the sweetness, you know, that sweetness and a little bit of alcohol can almost give you like a burning feel, which I personally don't enjoy. So that's why we keep our alcohol on this really, really low. So 9.5% alcohol just comes back to balance. I don't want the alcohol, the sugar, the acidity sticking out. So everything should just work along and play along well in the final wine. It's even if you serve it this chilled, it's amazing how expressive the aromatics is, and I'll just
And that will just improve year on year, Johan.
wines have amazing aging potential, and sorry, I'm just trying to show you a slide or two here, so we can. These wines, Barry, do have amazing aging potential, and it's we discussed it a little bit last week, but where last week's wine was a function of pH and structure and acidity levels that helped that wine to have a great longevity. There's also other factors in wines that help with their shelf life or longevity, and those are like we have lots of in red wines, which would be tannins. Also, that helps for aging. The more tannins, the longer you can age them, but more is not always better. As we know, sugar levels helps a great deal with longevity, and so does the acidity of the wine as well. helps a great deal. And alcohol, you know, if you take high alcohol wines like 18 or 20%, those fortified wines, they also age really well. In the case of this wine, it's the sugar that's helping it with its aging. And this style of wine can easily go 15 to 20 years from vintage. When you combine all those factors, high alcohol, tannins, and sweetness, you get a port wine, and those obviously go for 80, 100 years plus, but they kind of tick all the boxes. But today we're talking botrytis wines, or as we label it, Noble 8 Harvest wines. So typically to Noble 8 Harvest, very sweet, full-bodied because of the sugar. Mostly for this style of wine, well, I guess 95 plus 99% of this wine style, we use white grapes, so low in tannin or no tannins. And then depending on the grape varietal that you use, it can be low or more towards the higher side on the acidity. We use Sauvignon Blanc, which naturally has got a high level of acidity. And you'll remember from previous webinars that in our climate, we enjoy high acidities. So which is helps a great deal in this style of wine with high sugar to have that kinds of acidity levels. So sweet wines and pairings. So the pairings has been a big part of our webinars and a very popular part. Sweet wines or dessert wines can be challenging to pair with. So there's various ways of doing it. You can either go, what I like is just like using or pairing fresh fruit with it. Cheeses obviously goes really well. Pastries, I mean, something like biscotti with this is just amazing. Chocolates, maybe not so much with this wine style, but those are all stuff that you can pair with dessert wines. I personally don't really like dessert wines because you don't always have them for dessert. So I generally refer to them as sweet wines, but that's debatable. I guess
Really keen to hear what Michelle's decided to pair this week, this wine.
Yeah, I mean, let's see what Annie is up to, and maybe Annie, if you talking of pairing and it being quite tricky to pair with sweet wines, what is it that one needs to keep in mind? And are you looking for something of a similar sweetness, something sweeter, or something more acidic, or what's the thought process when pairing with these wines?
Hi, so the big thing is our dessert wine is quite sweet. So when you're pairing with something like that, you don't want something that's sweet as well. Otherwise, two is just going to clash. It's going to be too much sugar, so it's going to be competing against each other. So rather use the flavors that is in the wine and make something that is not as sweet, just to have all those flavors, just to have it all, I don't know, shine through and just complement each other instead of fighting against each other.
So it's more about matching flavors than sweetness.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Right. And so keeping that in mind, today we're going to be making a lavender morspoliki pot bread with a honey and lemon butter on the side.
So I think before we get started, maybe just for our British clients or people watching, just explain what it is a morspoliki.
So morspoliki is pretty much, it's an enriched bread dough. So it's kind of similar to a brioche. So the only difference to a brioche is the rising agent. So for this, we're using a must, which is a grape or fermented grape juice that you get during the harvest season, which means there's a very, very small gap for you to get the must. So instead of, if you can't find it, it's very, very easy to make a raisin ferment like we have over here. Now, making this, it's pretty easy. It's literally just raisins. So you can buy any packet of raisins from the shops, and it's just boiling water over it, adding some sugar, adding some yeast, and then putting it into a cupboard to ferment. And then you will see when it's ready, all your raisins will rise to the top, and then you will also see all these little bubbles in it, which means it's alive, basically. So, and then we're just gonna use that as your rising agent. And then it's just basically making it as you would any bread dough. So the recipes are all on the website, or they're sharing the recipes with you guys anyway. So after you have all of that, for me, it's pretty, or I normally make it in the morning when I wake up. So getting your ferments, getting everything ready, putting it in the cupboard, letting it leaving it for about 12 hours. And then by about 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, it should be ready. And then it's making your dough, covering it up, and then leaving it overnight. So by the next morning, it's all ready to go. And then you'll have this, as you can see, we've already worked it down again. And so it's just a nice little springy dough. So we're gonna roll nice little balls from that.
What size about?
I normally go about 80 to 90 grams. So also keep in mind, when your bowls are too big, it's going to take a lot longer to cook. If they're too small, it's going to take a little bit shorter time to cook. So I kind of find 80 to 90 grams. It's after it's risen in size or doubled in size, it's a nice little mouthful to eat after you've mixed everything in. So Michelle's just going to be rolling them over here. Yes. And then when you pack them into your, we're just going to be using this for presentation. Just make sure when you roll them, you pack them nice and tight. Okay.
Okay. We have a finished one. Let's just pop it over quickly.
Yes. So we did this about an hour ago. So we packed them in there nice and tight.
And then you let them rise or double in size again. Hey?
Yes. So then you just leave them for about an hour. Now we're just going to brush them with a little bit of milk.
What is the milk over the top? What does that do?
It's just to add a little bit of color. So normally you would egg wash it, but this is just a little bit of milk instead of the egg. And then we're going to move it to our coals. We're going to do similar like we did with our little pineapple bread. So
I guess this is something again that you can do in a oven as well, Annie.
you can in the oven as well. It's going to take about an hour at 180 degrees. So we're just going to get our coals nice underneath it, again creating that heat. So you want about a medium heat on there again, and then just to get all that and keep all that heat in there and create your little oven and vacuum in there so it bakes. Like, so we're going to give that about an hour to 40 minutes, and it should be, I'll check it after 40 minutes and see how it looks, but it should be there.
It look fantastic, Annie. We look forward to seeing the finished product there. So Johan, I see this wine's a 2015, and I realize you obviously haven't had the idyllic vintages to make Noble Land Harvest. Can you tell us a little bit about how the process works, and let our viewers know why you need the perfect conditions to make this wine?
Yes, yeah, you're right. And the 15 was the last vintage, if I've not mentioned that before, that we've did of this wine. Ever since, what's it, 16, 17, 18, 19, for the last 4 years, we couldn't make this style of wine, purely because we're not in control. We're not the ones making it. We're out to Mother Nature. She's in control of this wine and when we can make it. The reason being is that it's quite finicky in terms of you need to have the right conditions in terms of the right amount of rainfall, humidity, followed by enough wind or sunshine. Because this Botrytis cinerea is just the Latin name for this special type of fungi or mold that we have growing on the grapes that's responsible for what happens in this wine style. And this fungi or mold that grows over the bunches eventually causes the berries to shrivel and go into little raisins, where you have then this concentration of flavors. And these little shriveled raisin berries are the ones that we then pick and use for the winemaking process. I've got a few photos just to better explain that. I'm just looking at Annie's screen as well. I mean, I'm asking about the oven. Sure, you can do it there, but it's nothing quite as challenging and as fun as doing it on an outdoor fire. You know, it comes with its risks, but it's always much more fun. Anyway, getting back to the wine. Let me. Um, so yes, let's. I just wanted to briefly, before we dive into Noble Eight Harvest, the whole field of sweet wines. There's so many of them that it's often confusing. So I thought let's just quickly pack them into different categories, and then we can look at this wine in general. So um, the first one would be Jerepico or Muscat style wines. So these wines don't go through any form of fermentation whatsoever. So it's taking those bunches, they're allowed to go quite ripe and accumulate a lot of sugar. They picked, the juice is squeezed out of the berries, very sweet juice, but no fermentation happens. The alcohol in those wines, which is normally about between 16 to 18% alcohol, those are added alcohol, grape-derived alcohol spirit, but 96% grape spirit that is added back into the juice, which is a process. The adding of alcohol is a process called fortification. So from there, the name fortified wines. And sitting at that alcohol level, natural yeasts can't operate or ferment that juice and the sugar in the juice at those types of alcohol. So that juice is now preserved against any form of fermentation. So extremely sweet, 16 to 18% alcohol. And this would typically be, there's some beautiful examples of these, and these also age forever and ever. But this is typically just leaves you with a sweet sensation. There's not a lot of acidity in these types of wines. Port wines is if you take grape juice, really high concentration of sugar, you ferment it halfway, so you stop halfway, so you've got a little bit of alcohol at this point, but you also got a lot of sugar left. So with port wines, they fermented, allowed to ferment halfway. The fermentation is stopped by adding more grape spirit to this. So you've got a little bit of alcohol, you add more alcohol to take it up to between 18 to 22%. Again, the remaining sugar in the wine can't be fermented and converted into alcohol because the alcohol level is now too high, which again preserves this wine from fermenting any further. And what is high alcohol, and you've still got residual sugar in the port wine as well. So we're not going to go into styles of port wine today. There's many, from ruby ports, tawny ports, late bottle vintage ports. Amazing product, a whole category and a discussion on its own. We don't produce any ports on Benguela Cove purely because that's not what we do best in our part of the world. We can make port, but it's no point if you can't perform and produce something right up there with the best in the world, then we won't bother doing it. Then another famous one would be sherry wines, like port, that can only be produced in Portugal, although many other countries do it. Sherry, you can only call it sherry, like the discussion we had with champagnes, produced in many parts of the world, but sherries comes from the Sherry region in Spain. So what makes sherry different is the fermentation is not stopped at all. It's allowed to go all the way through, so till it's bone dry. It sits at that point at a 12% alcohol. It is then fortified, the process of adding alcohol to it, to 15.5 or 17% alcohol, somewhere in there. And that fortified dry wine is then allowed to mature in older barrels with a little bit of an oxygen space on top of the barrel, so the barrels aren't filled all the way to the top, which allows this, what we call a floor yeast, to grow on top of the wine, because this floor yeast uses the alcohol in the wine, but it also uses the little bit of oxygen. Yeast need oxygen to live. So these yeast can live for years and years on top of the wine and slows down the maturation process. But there is a slow, gradual aging process happening. like port, various styles. You can add sugar back into the sherry wines, or you can keep them dry. Different aging regimes have different names, quite a complex uh, certification process there for sherry wines. Then you might have seen or heard about straw wine or natural sweet wines. So these are also bunches or berries that are allowed with time to go into raisins. So there's two ways of doing it. Is one would be leaving it on the vines, but you always have the risk of rain or birds or whatever damaging it. The other process, and quite a common process, is called straw wine. So where the bunches are removed from the vine and they've either hanged out to dry, or that we don't use straw anymore these days, but in the old days it was a nice bed for the grapes. These days it will just be placed on nets, and with time they dry out, and once they've dried out to a level that you're happy with it, you then crush them and get the juice out of them. So anybody can make straw wine, but generally it's made in the warmer parts of the world where they don't have the occurrence of botrytis. They would make straw wine. Then ice wine, maybe another one. Okay, so straw wine also extremely sweet as it starts, and then the fermentation is stopped halfway through. So you've got a little bit of alcohol, but you've got lots of remaining sugar in the wine. And I had a question earlier in the Q&A, how do we stop that fermentation? It's a combination of cooling it down to a point where yeast can't operate. So we cool it down to close to 0 degrees so the yeast die off. We then add a little bit of sulfur. Sulfur, again, has got an antimicrobial action to it. So it also inhibits the growth of yeast cells. And then thirdly, we also filter it like the day after to remove any yeast cells that are present in the wine. So it's a combination of all those factors that we use to stop the fermentation, because it's not an easy to stop it once it really gets going. Ice wine, you might have heard or seen. So this is not berries shriveling or going into raisins. This is by the time grape berries hit -7 degrees Celsius. The biggest part of the water in the juice gets frozen. They get picked and they get pressed while they're still frozen, and only the nectar, the very sweet juice, runs out, and the ice crystals, the water, stays behind. So that's another way of sweetening it. And then the really special one, or the queen of them all, is the botrytis or the nobelate harvest. So as I said, Botrytis cinerea is the name of this fungi that grows on the grapes. It grows a layer over the bunches. It's got an enzyme that degrades the cell wall of the grape berry, and it's also got a little root system that grows through the cell wall of the berry. And there where it's punctured or the cell wall is degraded, it allows the evaporation of water inside the berry in that juice to evaporate. And what stays behind is all the sugars, the aromatics, and the acidities. So as that water evaporates, you can just imagine what stays behind as it shrivel just concentrates and concentrates more and more and more. Okay. Various degrees of alcohol. As I said, for our style, we prefer the lower in alcohol, fresher, what we believe is more in balance. So this is what happens, just to give you an idea. That is a microscopic view of the Botrytis cinerea that grows. This is what you see there. I know it doesn't look nice, but we actually get excited when we see this. So this is a healthy berry, and this is about over a 2-month period. You see there's first signs of infection. There it starts opening up the berry more, and the more it grows and the more the water evaporates as we go, the berry shrivels and goes in and just, as I said, you've got this beautiful concentration of flavors.
And sugars, of course, Johan. The final sugar level on that last little berry would have been around 35 Balling.
Yeah, the ones we did multiple pickings this year, because you're always trying to push it, to the limit, but you're not sure when you push, you try too hard and you're at risk of losing it all, because it can also backfire on you, when you try too hard and there's secondary bacterial infection, you can go all the way to sour rot, which smells like vinegar, and you lose it all. So we do multiple pickings, as we go along, but there's always but our last picking went up to 46,
Wow, that's
which is
amazing.
about 2.5 times normal sugars with beef. So I mentioned you need a couple of things. You need humidity, you need enough heat, you need rainfall. So we, with this body of water right in front of the property on Benguela Cove, we're lucky to have this mist in the mornings. This is what you see there. So we've got this layer of mist in the mornings. As the temperature rises or as the wind kicks in, that mist gets blown away. So you'll remember me saying the winds are coming from the ocean's direction, and the property is quite a steep slope to it. So on this side, where I'm showing now, on the northern side, it's sheltered from the prevailing winds coming from the ocean. So this little vineyard right there that you see there, and the one below it, is 2 Sauvignon Blancs vineyards. We've got mist in those vineyards, but because they're sheltered from the wind, the mist tends to hang around longer there with the rising day temperature, perfect humidity, So that is what you need, but then you need that mist to give way so that the sun gets in and eventually dries off those grapes again, because it stays humid, it stays wet, then it's going to go to the sour or the bad rot. So those are important, but then you need a couple of rain events as well, just to really kickstart this process. The humidity and the mist is fantastic, but the rain really kickstarts the growth of these spores. So we were quite well, I guess we were happy in the timing of it. In just after the day after Christmas, we had 100 millimeters of rain, and then followed 2 weeks later by another 30 millimeters. So these rain events just helped, to bring those spores, which are always in the vineyard, but only under certain conditions do they really kick off and start growing. So previous 4 years, we didn't have any botrytis. This year, we, as I said, the stars aligned, everything just worked out. And we always keep a close eye on the conditions, what we get from nature, rain, humidity. But then we also obviously keep a close eye on the vineyard. Is there signs in this vineyard of botrytis? If no, we don't bother. Like in a year like this year, we spotted early on, hang on, there might be a chance of getting botrytis, so we take the risk and we let it go all the way. So this is by the time we've picked them, this is what the bunches look like. So you can see they're all shriveled, and there's a nice botrytis growth on the bunches. This is what you don't want, Barry. I can just see you getting a fright. I got this from.
That's a viticulture's worst nightmare to see that, and I think as it is for a winemaker as well. I was going to say, Johan, do you put up bird nets to keep the birds away on those blocks, or do you not have a bird issue there?
Funny enough, we don't have a bird issue. I'm surprised by it, but we don't have any issues with birds now. But yeah, this is when it goes bad, and I got this from the internet. No,
I was going to just say that's definitely not Benguela's grapes. That's for sure.
This is sour. This is, you smell this before you've even entered the vineyard. This is not what you want. There's no point even in picking this or doing anything with this. This is just a loss. So this is always the gamble when trying to make these wines.
Yeah, just a quick question. When you press those grapes, obviously a normal return rate would be around 650 liters on a ton of grapes. With these wines, I imagine it's incredibly small.
Yeah, so thanks for asking that. If you try and imagine squeezing juice out of a raisin, it's really hard to get any juice. And the same goes for these wines. So you said you get 650 liters of juice out of a ton of grapes. With these, you're looking at 350 to 400 liters per ton, which is way, it's 20-25% less than what we normally get. But also, you know, on top, to get a ton of grapes of these light-weighted raisins, you need so much more. So we would normally get maybe 8 tons of an hectare. By the time we pick this, it's down to 4 or 5 tons because you've lost so much weight. So you lose weight, and your juice recovery is also way less. So it's with a lot of volume and quantity compromises that this happens, and therefore we usually end up with a small volume and usually put it into a smaller bottle because we just want to share it with more people, you know. So
also what again makes these wines expensive to make.
Extremely expensive to make, you know. It's if you do the numbers on these wines, you're doing it for the love of it and for the just to share something beautiful, because it is you get a bit of a fright when you start doing the calculations on all the weight lost and volume lost, and that's putting the risk of losing everything aside, you know. So yeah, gets one quite nervous when you start going down this path, but sweet rewards. So this is how we do a couple of pickings. This is what they look like once the vineyard team has done a selection. We do another selection on arrival at the winery. So the briefing to the team is all these bunches that are not 100% infected, they're like borderline ones. Even this one, anything with 50% and less raisins gets removed. So there you lose more of your grapes. And then these nicely raisined ones we'll keep. And just to make 100% sure, because we don't want to mess it up all at the end, you'll see this has got like a brownish tint to it. That was the ones that's gone bad. So that gets lost, that sour rot. These healthy ones also get thrown out because they're not infected with the botrytis. So it really confuses some of our temporary people. They spend the whole year taking out the rotten grapes, and now right at the end, we've lost our minds and we're throwing away the healthy grapes and keeping the rotted ones. So, so just a close-up, this is what we look. There's some nice raisins. You can imagine there's not a lot of juice that comes out of this. So what we do is we put it all in that press I showed you. There's a little bit of liquid coming from these berries here, and we actually need a little bit of that liquid just to rehydrate these raisins so they almost swell up. And after about a day, sometimes 2 days, leaving them, the berries with the juice, after they rehydrated, rehydrated, we then press them, and that allows for more juice to come out and to recover more juice from them. So that's how we eventually get the juice to come out. So this was taken this year. It's always a tradition when we start and when we end. When we start with bubbly, we have a glass of bubbly. With our last grapes being the Noble-8, we are at a glass of Noble-8. So there's the one we're tasting today. And on your right-hand side, that's what it looks like. It takes forever to work through all those bunches. It was during lockdown with a skeleton crew, so we had, I think, like a day and a half non-stop sticky grape sorting going on. But the 2020 is looking super. So
I was going to say, Johan, I'm sure it's going to be worth the wait for sure. Johan, we've got time for a couple of questions, and I think we've got to go back to Annie and see how her pot is looking.
yeah.
I've got a couple of questions from viewers. I think one that I think does spring to mind, and I think obviously is a concern to some people, is there mold in the wine?
No, I'm always hesitant to put up these photos. I usually just explain the process. I know it doesn't look great, but I wanted you to understand what happens. So no, there's no bacteria, no fungi or mold or anything in the wine to preserve these wines from any spoilage or any secondary fermentations, we filter them like you do with all wines, but these get sterile filtered as well. So no signs whatsoever of it's safe.
I'm sure. Johan, and then obviously you've chosen to use Sauvignon Blanc as the variety. Other varieties that you could use when making sweet wines?
Yes. So on this particular spot on Benguela Cove happened to be Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc works really well because it's quite an aromatic grape, but it's also got that nice acidity to it, which helps for the counterbalance. But it's not commonly used. I don't even know of another winery in South Africa that use Sauvignon Blanc for this wine style.
It's hugely challenging to use Sauvignon Blanc, to be honest. I mean, it is a grape that loves to get rot, but the bad rot, as you showed us. So there's only certain properties, and I think Benguela is one of very few that could possibly get this right.
Yeah, and there's other grape varieties. What you're looking for is a like a dense bunch, to keep some of the moisture in there, so the growth can actually spark from that. But you're also looking for a grape varietal that's got a soft skin, the berry skin. So ones that work well, obviously in South Africa, is Chenin Blanc. More internationally, Riesling is perfect for it. Gewürztraminer, some Semillon is a great one to use. But yeah, we as I said, our vineyard happened to be Sauvignon Blanc, which is uncommon in South Africa. But if you go to one of the benchmarks in the world for this one style of wine would be the French Sauternes wines, and they use Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon for the production of theirs. So Sauternes obviously very famous. They've claimed they discovered it first, which is not the truth. The most, maybe not the most famous one anymore, but the arguably one of the best in the world would be the Hungarian Tokaj wines. They were the first that started with this botrytis wine style, but they're using different grapes again. So yeah, for us, the Sauternes would be the closest comparison in terms of grapes we use.
Yeah, and then another one for you, just why the small bottle? I think you touched on that earlier. I think obviously traditionally a Noble Late Harvest only comes out in a 500 ml bottle. Can you give us an answer why you would do that, or you would traditionally, why that is the size we go with?
With the smaller ones?
Yes.
No, it's purely because, it's we would have 2,500, 3,000 liters of this in total, and just the demand for these is incredible, and everybody wants it. But by putting it in smaller bottles, we can share it with so much more people, because who knows when the next vintage is going to be. If one guy, two clients come and buy up everything, then the rest of us might be without it for, I don't know, another 4 or 5 years when we have botrytis occurring again. I had, if I may interrupt while you're looking at some of those questions, I had a question last week which I couldn't get to, Barry, to answering. And if I can just pull it up. Actually, just...
You did have it up there, yeah?
Okay, can you see my...
Yeah, I can.
Just want to make it a bit bigger here. So I had a question on this certification seal, the sticker on our bottle. You can see my screen, okay? Yeah.
Was perfect. Go back.
Let's try one more time. Let's try one more time.
Annie's getting ready there to show us her creation. Are you battling, Johan?
It doesn't want me to
There you go.
share.
Let's come up.
Okay, so can you see a screen with a little butterfly on a bottle?
Yeah, we can see the certification seal and a butterfly. Yeah.
So I had a question last week about what's the sticker here on the bottle, and I couldn't get around to answering it. But if you read on it, it says integrity and sustainability. So in South Africa, every bottle of wine that we do to export and to sell the wine, you need to have this certification. So every bottle of South African wine is certified for its integrity, what's inside, what's on the label, but it's also certified sustainable. So everything we do in the vineyards, growing it, what we use, if it's fertilizers or pesticides or herbicides, everything is controlled and documented and audited that it is sustainable. It's done in a sustainable matter for the environment, but also for our people. And this gets audited, and once you pass the test, you can get the sticker and you can sell your wine. So South Africa was the first wine producing country in the world to have this certification. And since then, many countries have gone and adopted, actually came here to adopt the same process and to see how it's about and how we regulate it. The second part of it is the integrity part. Barry, just help me. Can you see a bottle on the screen? Because I can't see my own screen.
I've unfortunately got all our
so
speakers covering it, so I can't comment, John.
Don't worry about it. So I'm just going to try and show you here. So the integrity part of the certification is, if you look at your bottle, if it says Sauvignon Blanc, then it has to be Sauvignon Blanc on the bottle. Okay, this is not a great example. We can't just go and call it Sauvignon Blanc if it's not by law and by paper and audited that it is actually Sauvignon Blanc. So why would you put Sauvignon Blanc on the bottle when that's not what's inside, or the majority grape? Well, you'll be surprised with how creative people get with their product. You might have products coming with a French brand and a French label, but surprise, surprise, that stuff is coming from all sorts of places, be it from Spain, Italy, Hungary, wherever people. So there's a lot of wine moving around. So for it to be Sauvignon Blanc, it's checked. For it to say wine of South Africa, it's checked that it's only wine of South Africa, not from any other country that gets mixed in. If it says Walker Bay, it is a 100% Walker Bay. I can't go and take wine from a neighboring wine region and blend it into this. If it says estate wine, it's checked that it's only wine from our property used and nothing else. So everything is controlled and monitored. So what you get is legit, audited, the real thing. It's from that country, it's that grape, it's grown in that vintage, and it's from that region. We can't get creative with anything we do as far as our product goes. As I said, we were the first ones. New Zealand has started it now, one or two other countries, but there's not a lot of countries, wines that carry this certification and this auditing process.
I know Wine GB, Johan, are actually looking into that, and they're using South Africa as a benchmark.
Okay, so yeah, there you go.
I'm pretty sure the UK might follow a very similar certification system going forward. All right, Annie, I think we should move across to Annie and see what she's got to show us there.
Hi, Barry. So we just took it out of the pot. We brushed it with a little bit of sugar water. As you can see, it's nice and shiny. And we spring a little bit of honeycomb over the top, just for a little bit of garnish. And then we got our butter on the side. And that's it, Michelle.
You want to try it?
Yeah. And then it's just about breaking a little piece off.
Just breaking the bread. Looks delicious.
Yeah, like I said, same thing about not having it too sweet, and then it's just having all those flavors that just paired with your wine.
Try it with some butter.
Yes, and then your little balls. And yeah, there we go. That's it.
Cool.
Oh.
Back to you guys.
Thank you, Annie. That looks amazing. As always, I wish I could be there with you. Next time in South Africa, you're going to make me one of those breads. It looks fantastic.
No problem. Definitely, Barry.
Johan, we've got a little bit of time just to go through a bit more Q&A, and then I think we need to start wrapping up.
There's some questions on, does the grape cultivar we use have an impact on the final product? It does, definitely. What happens with this botrytis, the mold, there's an enzymatic reaction that happens, which it's a oxidation, slow oxidation that happens. So you do lose a bit of the typical cultivar characters in the grape. That enzymatic reaction converts it into what that dried peaches smell that you get. But of course, with the juice that stays behind, there's still some traces. If you do the exact same thing, let's say we had a Chenin Blanc vine, Semillon and a Sauvignon next to each other in the same vineyard, those three wines will definitely taste different in taste, in aroma, but also in sweetness and acidity and balance level. They will also be different. 2020 was another question. When will it be available? Myself and Michelle is just polishing that off and getting it ready. It is looking fantastic. It is super sweet after that all those beautiful raisins we've had. So we're so excited about that. We're bottling it in July, and then soon after we'll be sending it over.
What sort of volumes did you get this year, Johan?
Yeah, as I said, we've got a big demand for this wine, and not being able to make it for the last 5 years, when we had the ability to make it, we took both those vineyards and left both of them and took a bit of a gamble, which paid off, and we've got just over 6,000 liters this year. So that's fantastic. It'll give us about 15,000 bottles, but as I said, that might need to last, I don't know, another 5 years.
Very possible. Are there any more questions we haven't answered there? Just have a...
we see. Are you allowed to sell your wines in SA? Yeah. So lots of excitement going around. I'm sure by now we've got some people camping out and queuing at bottle shops already, hopefully at our door as well. So sales, James, as from tomorrow, is allowed in South Africa again. So we can, Mondays to Thursdays from 9 to 5, South Africans can get their favorite wines again. Thank goodness for that.
So nothing available on the weekends? Is this the 4 days a week?
You need to stock up in advance.
Okay.
Okay. So we've it's been a fun couple of weeks. Barry, you can see my screen?
I can. Perfect. Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun. This 6 wines. I hope we get to do more wines going forward. We've just touched on the tip of the iceberg in terms of wines and what there is to tell you about wines. But hopefully in a next series, or when I'm over again and tasting that side, we can continue the discussion. In the meanwhile, the wines are available from Barry. We've got a container leaving this week with more wines, with some more new releases on there.
And Johan, we also, just to confirm, we are definitely going to go ahead with the vinography tasting. I think that'll be our next webinar that we'll plan together. We haven't fixed a date, but it will be towards the end of June.
Yeah, and that's something to look out for. The vinography tasting, I'm really excited about those ones. But you're always welcome. I've got my email and my Twitter handle on there. If there's any time you want to ask a question or send me a note what you think of the wine, please do. I always enjoy communicating about the wines until you guys can come and visit us this time. We'll have to communicate this way, I guess.
Just a reminder before you start, Johan, for those that haven't joined our wine club, have a look at it. You get great discounts. You get access to some of the latest wines when they arrive. You'll come to special private tastings with Johan when he comes across to the UK or in the South Africa. So I really recommend having a look. Go on our website and see all the things that we offer when you join our wine club.
Yeah, we've got wine club members are obviously in the loop on those special once-off library stock wines, and there's one or two surprises on the next container to look out for. And if you're in the wine club, you're one of the few lucky ones to be guaranteed to get your hands on them. So just some more images, and of course you can own a little piece of sunset next to the Benguela Cove vineyards in South Africa as well. Barry, I don't think I've mentioned it, but we've got on Benguela Cove, we've got about just over 100 plots that you can actually buy. So from this photo, you've got the vines at the back of you, and you've got the lagoon and the ocean in front of you. So you're stuck between the vines and the oceans and the mountains and the blue sky. So it's quite a tough place to be down here in Africa. So,
and you live on that estate, don't you, Johan?
I'm working, yeah, I'm living here and in between the vines.
And we feel for you with that view every day.
There's options of plots, or you can spec houses or finished houses. So yeah, you can. It's a little glass of Benguela Cove goes down well with these types of views and surroundings. That's just some more images. The mountains we're surrounded about, and this I took last week after our Semillon Sauvignon session. We had again one of our signature sunsets, and then last but not least, Barry, I was thinking. I was talking so much and educating about different French terms like terroir and patronage and tirage and saignée, and I mean, I can't just educate everyone on French terms. So I wanted to leave you with just a little bit of Afrikaans, which is our mother tongue, or mine at least, and that is to say thank you very much, which is baie dankie, which I know you know, but for our English guests on the webinar, next time when Barry delivers wine to you and you want to thank him in Afrikaans, you can just say what we've got at the bottom. It's baie a donkey, which directly translated into our language is thank you very much. So next time you can tell Barry baie a donkey.
Thank you, Johan. And I just want to say a big thank you to all our hosts. Thanks to Johan and to Annie and Michelle. I think it's been a fantastic 6 weeks. I've had a lot of fun, and it's something that we definitely will become the new normal. It's something we'll do more of going forward. And yeah, you've educated us. We've had a lot of fun. We've had a little bit of technical issues along the way, but it's real and it's been fantastic. So thanks to you guys. And then just to all my loyal UK supporters, we've had fantastic wine sales. You're a lot more than customers, you've become friends. I think we've got to know each other through wine tastings on the terrace, and I'm sure through these webinars has certainly helped us get to know Benguela Cove and get to know the people behind the brand. So from my side, thanks so much for it all.
Yeah, no, absolute pleasure. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself next Sunday this time. Probably call you up again to chat some more. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I have one or two last questions. on are we willing to share this information on WSET courses. Of course, anytime, more than happy to do it. You know, apart from the love of making wine and enjoying wine is also, I enjoy as much sharing and talking about wine to people. So definitely, be it in this format or when I'm over in the UK, more than willing to assist with the WSET program. And then a question on the vinography webinar. Lots of excitement on that one. It's going to be fun. We're going to cover those 3 wines, but we'll tell you all about when and how and everything on the vinography one. As I mentioned last week, this is where myself and Michelle get all geeky about wine and be adventurous and try various weird and wacky things. So definitely one not to be missed. Thank you, Annie, Michelle, Barry, everyone for joining. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, everyone. Until the end of the month.
Yes. Bye bye.
Cheers.